are listening to the Balancing Act podcast. Here's your hosts, Jamie Wonko and Joe Vitale.
All right, that's okay. So, hey, guess what? I didn't know if you knew, but we are officially recording again for the second time. What's up, buddy? How we doing? Welcome back.
Hey, how are you?
We're flanneled up today. It was theme day. We've talked about theme days before.
I don't mind a flannel day, I have to say.
Flannel day is simple. It's when it's like just like your favorite literary character day, and I'm like,
yes,
I don't know what
it's
to do.
complicated. And
Yes.
So here we are. We are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics today, the health and wellness of our teacher population. And it's something that we talk quite a bit about, really woven throughout the Balancing Act podcast. So I'm very happy to be able to be talking and learning about that today. This is a new get for us here.
I mean, this is huge, listeners.
This is huge, yeah.
So we had our friend from north of the border, okay, from Canada, our friend Dawn Weissman. So we have our second. Let's bring him in here. There has to be fanfare. Well, hello, Mr. Charley Burley from across the pond in England.
Hello. How are you doing?
You could tell by that accent. We are very excited that we are bringing America and Great Britain back together again.
Absolutely.
And we are two United States history teachers. I hope you will not hold that against us as we dive into things here. We're so excited to have you today, Charley. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. It's so nice to meet you, Charley.
Yeah, lovely to meet you both too. It's the first time.
Charley, we'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. We know that you were in education and now you're doing something pretty unique. So I'd love for you to give us a little lowdown as to how Charley Burley, the teacher's health coach, came to be. Yeah,
absolutely. It is a mouthful, isn't it? The teacher's health coach. In my mind, it was a very simple, does what it says on the tin sort of name for the company, but it is a mouthful to kind of like repeat all the time. So my name is Charley Burley. I'm a former teacher. So I taught primary school, mostly upper key stage 2. So that's sort of your 8 to 11-year-olds. And I taught that for 8 years over here. I also taught a couple of years in Thailand as well when I first graduated at a sort of a starting international school.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
About halfway sort of through my career, I hit burnout, basically. It only took me 5 years, which unfortunately isn't a record. I think people hit burnout a lot sooner than that. And so around this time, I was probably about 26 years old. And like I say, it was burnout, basically. But at the time, the only words I had for it was essentially like a mental breakdown, which at 26 years old, still living with my parents, was a crazy. I never thought it would happen to me. And up until that point, mental health, well-being, anything related to those fields was in my mind. I was very ignorant to it. There was a lot of stigma. It was, mental health was literally something that happened to other people. And my picture of mental health was essentially someone who can't get out of bed. And that wasn't me. So I didn't feel like I had any problems with my mental health, despite it all bubbling to the surface quite soon after. But yeah, I was 5 years into my career, and essentially that academic year, my LSA, so my support teacher, basically support assistant, was diagnosed with cancer and went off work. And she was she was like my unofficial nan, and we'd only been working together for a few months, but she was the nan of the school, and I haven't got any grandparents anymore, and she became my nan. And sadly, she later passed away next year, but same academic year in June. So that was going on. And again, the thing that gets me is that none of this was at the forefront of my mind at the time. It was all happening in the background, and I was just put your head down, plow on, get on with stuff, crack on. And at around the same time, my previous partner and I had been together 5 years. That relationship came to an end. She'd been living in Africa for a year, signed to another year, and that relationship came to an end. And then it was my first year teaching in year 6. So over here, year 6 is like the final year of primary school. And they do their big end of key stage 2 assessments. So there's a lot of pressure. Primary schools are pretty much judged on these results, loads and loads of pressure. And about a week before that, I was stood in the middle of the classroom, and a boy came in who found it really difficult to regulate his emotions. And he'd been on a reduced timetable, so he was sort of reintegrating up to full days worth of learning, and something had happened at a break time on the playground. It was something to do with football or something, and essentially he came into the classroom very, very dysregulated, and there was chairs going, pencils, books going all over the place. And essentially I had a full-blown panic attack, sorry. And it was only the second time I'd ever had a panic attack. And for anyone who hasn't experienced that, all I can say is that I was convinced I was dying, like 100% convinced. It felt like a fridge had been tipped over on my chest. And I just had to get out of there. And probably it's not funny at all, but probably the funniest thing is that I was most concerned about scaring the children. Like, considering I was completely convinced I was dying, my thought was, oh no, the kids, they're going to be really scared. So anyway, cut a long story short, there was paramedic visits and ECGs and time in hospital and blood tests and things. And it turned out that I was chronically stressed, and I was diagnosed with chronic stress and anxiety. And that sort of was a turning point in my career. And after that point, I was still in teaching for another 3 years. But during that time, I retrained to be a nutritionist, and then eventually retrained to be a mental health and exercise coach, kind of using exercise as a sort of a prescriptive tool and using it to elicit more favorable mental health and support people using things like dopamine and endorphins and helping them understand the power of exercise. So yeah, that's kind of got me to where I am now. Bit of a long story, but that's my journey.
I can't thank you enough just for being willing to share. Because there's two things that I think I don't want to speak for all men, but as you know, men, there's a lot of stigma with mental health where just rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. And that's not necessarily the case. There are things that I struggle with, Charlie, that you're talking about, that I've went through some of the exact same things as you. But I think also the perfect storm of the events that took place, your nan, which I would assume is your grandmother. That's a term we don't hear over here very often. The person you were very close to at your school passing away, the girlfriend leaving, the stress of taking over 6th grade, like the perfect storm of all of those things at once. I think you would assume would have, I mean, that's not to pinpoint why it happened, but that could be very well how those factors played into you having not one of those panic attacks. So, I mean, one of the things that we might want to jump into here is you also talked about, there's probably some slight differences between our school systems.
Yeah.
So, and what grade did you teach once again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it was, we call it sort of, we have key stage 1 and key stage 2. So it was upper key stage 2. So that's sort of, we call it year 5 and year 6. So that's your sort of, I think, 8 to 11-year-olds off the top of my head. Yeah.
So, Jane, what is that, like 4th grade here, 3rd, 4th grade?
Yeah, so I'm just curious to just to kind of back up a little bit. What sort of training do you is required of you to? So you said you were 26 years old. You had already been working for a few years, but you were still living at home. So it's a very similar situation to something that I can see myself as well. So I went to college at 18, graduated at 22, and then had finished my master's at 25. So I'm just curious. We have like a 4-year undergraduate degree for teaching. Is it something similar that you would have been looking at for yourself for college as well?
Yeah. So that's sort of what I did. So I think a couple of years before I started, it went from a 4-year to a 3-year. So it was university or college at 18, graduated at 21. And then I moved straight to Thailand to teach out there with that former partner I was talking about for a few years before going back to the UK to teach in mainstream in the UK.
And in the UK, do you have, so we have quite a bit of field work here, at least in New Jersey where we are, and it would be required, like as a sophomore or your second year in college, you would go into classrooms and do some visits, just observing. And then as a junior, you do about like 15 weeks where you're going once a week for 15 weeks, and then you start teaching. And then as a senior, you have to do a full semester, about 20 weeks, 5 days a week, like full time. To practice and really get ready before your job. Is there like field work that you need to do and things like that beforehand?
Yes. So So with the degree I did, pretty much exactly the same. So in your first year, I think in your second term, we went in and we were sort of observing, and then we started to do like a few like lesson starters and openers and a few plenaries and things. And by the end of your first year, you then go in and you teach for a few weeks. I think it's like a month. You kind of shadow the teacher and teach full lessons. Second year, it then builds up to, I think it's half a term, so about 6 to 8 weeks. Okay. And then I think in my third year, I did a whole term. Okay. And by that point, the class teacher is literally your sort of support assistant sort of thing. Right. But in the UK, there are lots of different ways to get into it now. So there's sort of SCIT, which is like school-centered initial teacher training, which is like a year, and you can go in and you basically you learn and you teach at the same time, and it's a really intense year, really, really intense.
I'm assuming that's similar to like for us, like alternate route, right? Where like you already have a degree in something, and then you go back and you decide, I'm going to teach in the classroom. So you're taking classes, but you're also in the classroom, which has to be very daunting. To say the least. Yeah. Sounds very similar. Yeah.
And so when you were working with the woman that you lost that had passed away, you said that there were the two of you together. Were you teaching in the same classroom, or was it like in the same grade level?
So she was, over here, if you're really lucky, you have like a teaching assistant or like a learning support assistant, where they're sometimes called, so like TAs or LSAs. And obviously it depends if you're sort of mainstream or if you work with special educational needs schools or private. But I was lucky enough to have, for a lot of my career, an LSA in my room. So LSAs wouldn't be qualified. Sometimes they are, but usually wouldn't be qualified teachers. They'd be there to kind of support you to work with groups. And quite often, they'll go on and they'll do additional qualifications and things like that, and obviously receive like in-school training and stuff. But yeah, my LSA, Sally was her name. She'd been at the school for like 25 years, I think. She was awesome. She really, really was awesome. But yeah. So that was her role within the room.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure. We don't have, so we do have like sometimes 2 teacher classrooms that are with special education teacher and then a general education. And in some cases with special education, we have paraprofessionals that, that would come in and assist and things like that. But typically we wouldn't see, 2 teachers together unless it was a special needs situation. So I was just curious what it looked like. We're experiencing a teacher shortage. Is that something that you're seeing there as well? We just don't have many young people want to become teachers, or we have tons of teachers that have degrees in teaching that don't want to teach, or like you, they do it for a few years and realize, oh no, and they leave. Yeah.
There's a big sort of, it's the retention crisis is being sort of dubbed over here. I mean, you've seen a lot about that, and the government have had a few years of having a lot of years having these targets, but for the last few they've missed their sort of I can't remember what they call it, but it's not a retention target, but it's like new teachers kind of recruitment targets. They've missed that for a long time. However, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of the people that I kind of follow on Instagram and things who have taken a gap year, or they've gone traveling or whatever, I'm seeing a lot of people saying that they can't get a job in the UK at the moment. And I think it depends on the area very much. So in some areas you might have even up to 50 applicants per space. There's a place in the north of England, I can't remember. I think it's sort of near Birmingham or something, but up sort of a bit more Midlands and a bit more up north, you have some places where lots and lots of teachers going for one job. And then elsewhere in the country, you apparently have not enough teachers to fill the spaces. But it's strange because you hear sort of, in the news and stuff, you hear these headlines about recruitment targets being missed, but then you also hear people struggling to find jobs. So I'm not sure whether it's within specific areas that they're struggling or what, but yeah, it seems to be a bit of a retention crisis.
We also talk about teacher pay, and I'm just curious: is there like an across the board amount? So we just in New Jersey alone, we have over 600 school districts in one state, and the starting salary can range from $50,000 a year to $80,000 a year. I'm curious: is that something that's more universal there, like similar salaries, or is it different depending on where you are?
I think it's probably a little bit more universal from what you said. So there's kind of the main, again, I only worked in kind of mainstream primary, so I didn't work in secondary schools. didn't work in special educational needs or the private sector. So I can only talk from my experience. My partner's a teacher as well, and I kind of understand a bit. She's been in it longer than me. She's been in it 12 years. So I kind of understand a bit more of the upper pay scale from her end. But I started on, I think it was like £20,000, which I don't know what that is in dollars, 25, 30. I don't know what the conversion is at the moment, but it was very, very low. And they have, because of the recruitment crisis, they've put the and obviously cost of living and stuff, they've put the base salary up quite a lot. So I think now it might even be sort of £26,000, or it might even be a little bit more, to be honest, but haven't looked at that for a while. So you have like a main pay scale, and the theory being that you kind of work through, and as you go and you gain experience and you kind of get these things on your belt, and maybe you take on some more responsibilities, you kind of climb this main pay scale, and then you can go, so MPS that's called, and then you can go to UPS, which is upper pay scale, and then you might have like a TLR, which is a teaching and learning responsibility, I think, and that, you know, maybe you're head of English or something, and you might get paid a little bit more for that. Yeah, what was the other thing?
So the equivalent in dollars is about $33,000 US. Yeah, which is what was my starting salary in 2001.
Oh wow! Yeah. So and also to get to, of course, for perspective for us, we live about 45 minutes from New York City. So it's the fourth largest populated area on the planet. So it's very expensive to live here. But it's also for some of the same reasons, like you were talking about. You know, you have people that apply because they want to work in more affluent districts with you know, better students, higher achieving students, wealthier areas, because A, the pay is sometimes better, and B, there's less behavior problems or headaches, so people try to get into those districts. So you might have more applications in those districts for those people, but in your inner city districts, you know, it's not uncommon for jobs to go unfilled for an entire year. And it's the first time in our district that I can remember multiple positions being unfilled, you know, for that cycle. And I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, some of the things that you kind of champion, like the idea that like right now it's the holiday season, right? That's when this episode's coming out for all of our listeners. And one of the reasons I reached out to you is because this is like literally the most stressful time. Okay. The time between like Thanksgiving and Christmas time, when you're trying to do all the things for all the people, and you're also dealing with the crazed nature of students in a classroom, because, you know, it's the holidays and they're all, you know, excited and sugared up out of their minds. But it's like one of the things I saw in one of your posts that you talked about, like the signs of burnout for someone during the holiday season. And I think sometimes we can't see the forest through the trees, and it might be good to just have a little discussion on like, what are some of the signs of someone being, you know, on the path to being burnt out during this season, and how would one maybe like recharge the batteries, you know?
So coach us.
Yeah. I mean, no pressure, you know?
Yeah. It's a huge question. The first part is definitely more straightforward to answer than the second. I always give, or I don't always give, but quite often with clients, I'll give a really annoying answer of like, well, it depends. You know, it depends on you, depends on your experience, depends on your starting point, all that good stuff. So that's the annoying answer. But we'll go through like a couple of bits that we can think about. In terms of like the signs of burnout, I think it's important to consider that if you're experiencing a few of these, you know, 2 or 3 of these, it's not, you know, I'm experiencing one of these, okay, I have burnout, or I'm experiencing burnout, or I'm about to. Very much it is, if you're sort of having 3 or more of these symptoms and signs, and they're continuing for, let's say, a month into 2-3 months, then you're really kind of, you're going to burn out pretty soon. So some of those things, I'll talk about the ones that we don't often think about. You know, we think about the physical exhaustion, but we don't often think about things like the social disconnection. So that kind of not wanting to be near other people, want to be around other people, not being able to have the headspace to maintain relationships or to deal with other people, that disconnect, or for fear of what people asking you how you are, because you just don't want to think about it. You don't want to talk about it. That real social disconnection is a big one that we don't think about. And then we also get into things like losing your passions and losing your creativity and all of these sorts of things, because quite often as teachers, from my personal experience anyway, and the teachers I've worked with, we can allow teaching to become our whole identity. It's so easy to do because of how much time it takes up, and there's suddenly nothing left for us. So when we're trying to build boundaries, we find it even more difficult because almost there's nothing to build boundaries around. I guess I'm dropping in some of the things we can think about in terms of changing them as well. So those are two of the big ones. Sleep disruption is a very, very common one as well, whether it's insomnia or sort of waking up a lot throughout the night, or having very disturbed dreams or very disturbed sleep. So that's a big one. We can then move on to some of the sort of the more physical ones. So we can see loss of libido, we can see, and we get into like chronic stress here as well, loss of libido, hair loss, weight gain, changes in appetite, all of these sorts of things as well. And you might see some of the more sort of emotional impacts of it, which might be like a loss of empathy. So as teachers, we're really conscientious, we're compassionate, we're caring, we want to give to other people. But quite often when our emotional batteries are drained, we are very much, we can't take on anything from anyone else, right? And then someone says something and we feel like we want to pay attention, we want to support them, but our own emotional battery is so drained. So those are some of the really common ones. So yeah, loss of creativity, some of those physical impacts, loss of passion, and also one I didn't mention is sort of apathy. So in terms of your passions, things that used to really interest you, things that you used to really enjoy, suddenly you're kind of like, don't really want to do that, and you don't feel like you've got that even that get up and go to do the stuff that you used to love. So yeah, that sort of real apathy for life, that's a really common one.
Yeah, so all that's me. No, it's funny. You are like saying some things like I recently and I'm going to steal a line from my co-host here. As I've had a case of the don't want tos, like, I just don't want to. Like, we had a fall break the beginning of November. It had like, the list of things that I wanted to do around the house, like little things here, little things there. I wanted to put this away, deal with that thing, and I was just like, meh.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it, and I didn't. But I have, experienced some of those things that you're talking about, and I've. This was more last year. Like last year, I found myself being very tired, having trouble with just like staying motivated, not necessarily staying awake, but like, and we've talked about this on the podcast, James. Like, you put so much into being on stage while you're in the classroom that like it's physically draining. Like I'm not trying to be melodramatic. Like, I really feel that way some days. Like, I get home and I'm just like, you want to collapse on the couch or sit in the chair and like mentally remove yourself from any stimulation. So I'm kind of wondering what your advice would be when I get stuck in a rut like that.
I think I shared this with someone recently, actually, on a podcast. When we kind of think about actions to take, what I see a lot of the advice being is very, very practical, quite high expectations. And as teachers, we have so many expectations placed on us already. We've got so much going on, so many things to think about. For someone like me to turn around and say, okay, well, just eat your 5 a day and get 30 minutes of exercise and make sure you go to bed at 9 and don't look at your phone, it feels really disempowering and it feels really overwhelming. So I'm going to kind of do the opposite, because this is what I see work, and almost lower the bar as low as we can, pick the low-hanging fruit and slowly start to build ourselves up. So the smallest we can start, when you are reaching burnout, you're super overwhelmed, you've got so much going on, like you say, you can't even fathom, you haven't got the headspace to think about anything for yourself, is to first and foremost create some space. Because in your day, you're moving at a million miles an hour, you've got, like I say, so many things going on. You've got cognitive fatigue, you've got that patience fatigue, you've got decision fatigue, every type of mental fatigue going. So if we can create some space, and within that space, just create some distance from school, create some distance from the shoulds and the musts and the need tos in life, which parents will resonate, carers will resonate with that. But I don't have kids, and I feel a lot of those all the time. If we can create some space, and that can literally look like you get to work and you pull up your car and you turn the engine off and you just sit for 60 seconds and you don't look at your phone and maybe you just watch a squirrel run up a tree, or you just watch the clouds for 60 seconds. And I know for me, if I was talking to 26-year-old me, I'd be like, oh, shut up, wishy-washy nonsense. But actually, what happens is when our brain is sort of go, 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 basically our brain cells, our neurons, they eat, right? They feed. We feed them with glucose, but they also kind of do the other thing. So they produce waste products. Now, the brain's great. The brain's got this like cleanup crew, which goes around and it will get rid of those waste products. But that's when you rest. And as teachers, we don't rest. So what we see is our brain constantly being in go, go, go. The waste products build up. We can feel very mentally fatigued and tired. But over time, that can actually become toxic for the brain. And we can actually see certain parts of the brain atrophy and shrink. So these little moments, they give the cleanup crew of the brain, this is a very unscientific explanation, but they give the cleanup crew of the brain time to repair. And also what we see in the brain is we kind of have these two different networks. We have one, well, there's many more than two, but these are the main two. We have the central executive network, which is kind of like your problem solving, focused, engaged, switched on brain. And then you've got your default mode network, which is essentially you're daydreaming, you're going for a walk, you're not doing anything, you're in the shower, you're washing the dishes. And what happens in that default mode network, or DMN as it's called, is the brain starts to subconsciously problem solve. It starts to connect memories. It starts to process emotions. All of these things that as teachers, we don't give our brain time and space to do. So when I say just sit for 60 seconds, it's not just to kind of sit and be, although it's very much to allow the brain to do some of the things it needs to do. And just taking 60 seconds to give yourself a brain break has unbelievable amounts of hormonal and neurological and physiological benefits. So that would be number one. Just find these little pockets in your day where you can give yourself these little brain breaks just to get you started.
Yeah, that is great advice to start. I was looking at I quickly researched something. I did a quick Google search. I don't know how accurate it is, but it says like the amount of decisions that a teacher makes in a day are 1,500 decisions during the teaching day. That's 4 decisions a minute during teaching time. And like, I know, and I still have the counter on my desk, James, the little clicker counter, because I know you did it. We were going to talk about this. Like, just click the amount of times like you're asked the question during a particular like time frame, and sometimes it becomes very, very overwhelming. One of my problems is during that 60 seconds of time, I'm always thinking what's hard for me to like kind of zone in on, or what I wind up zoning in on, is what else do I have to be doing? Okay, when I get in, I have to do this, I have to do this, and I start like running through that mental list of things that I need to do. So it's very hard for me to stay present in the idea of being mindful. Mm-hmm. So yeah. It's something I need to practice more of, which I think would help me. Because if I'm going to make it a habit, I have to like, it's 60 days or however long I have to do it, like to really focus in and make it a habit. I think that's good advice to start for sure. Yeah, definitely. I think, when your mind starts running away from you in those moments, I think for a while as well, there's a point to kind of not beat yourself up about that. Because another thing we have as teachers is this perfectionist mindset. It's this perfectionist prism, this sort of paralysis by analysis, right? And we have to get everything right. And we a lot of us anyway, from my experience, have a bit of a fear of failure. I know I definitely did for a long time. And if I wasn't achieving, and if I wasn't ticking the goals, and if I wasn't doing it perfectly, I'd really beat myself up about it. And I'd really put loads of pressure on myself. And a lot of it was internal pressure. There's obviously some external pressure. But when it comes to something like, when you said to explain that reminded me of the first time I tried meditation. And I was sitting there going, I don't know if I can swear, I won't swear, but I was sitting there going, for goodness sake, like, I can't clear my mind and this isn't working. And I just, after about 5 minutes, I was more frustrated than when I went in. And actually, what I learned was just to sit there. And if thoughts come through your mind, and I know we're not talking about meditation here, but if thoughts kind of come through your mind, you can kind of observe them and acknowledge, okay, cool, I'm thinking about cleaning the kitchen, or I'm thinking about getting the shopping or whatever. But actually, I can almost detach myself from that thought and let it go. And sometimes it won't. Don't get me wrong. It'll be like a woodpecker and you won't be able to get it in your head. But even just accepting that, right now, my brain is really, really busy. I'm just going to sit with that for a while, and that's okay. And I think that compassion for us as teachers, I don't know if you guys agree, but I've struggled for a long time to be compassionate with myself. Oh, yeah. And by the way, Jane,
I think you have to give yourself grace.
Yeah. And
You
I
don't
think
give yourself
Jamie's,
grace. How can you give it to anybody else?
yeah. And Jamie's, happy place might actually be, walking around her brand new kitchen and cleaning it. I mean, that's, I mean,
Never cleaning.
never cleaning. But the kitchen is beautiful, by the way.
Never cleaning.
But no,
No.
it's funny you said that because I
I
constantly
just
am
got a new
thinking
kitchen,
about.
Charlie. It's like the highlight of my life.
I mean, a new kitchen, that is pretty awesome. That's like adulting 10 out of 10.
Thank you. Thank you.
I saw something today. It was like, now I know why adults would get so excited on game shows when they won an appliance. I always that made me laugh. I saw that today.
I love the idea of sitting, especially because, it doesn't cost you anything. You're not, and like you said, like the low hanging fruit, it is a lot of times, like we all know, we've all been taught what you're supposed to do, and it doesn't make you do it. So like we all sort of understand what it means to eat healthy. It doesn't mean that we all do it. We all know that we're supposed to exercise. It doesn't mean we always have to do it. So that suggestion for me is golden, because it is something that I'm already in the car. I'm already stopped. I'm there. And it's something that everyone can do no matter what. And it really is great because you can regroup, reset, be ready. It's also something I think that would be equally as great at the end of the day, if possible, when you get, I mean, I know in our parking lot at our school, I often have to wait. Otherwise, someone might crash me on the way out if I try to. It's never a good look when people are that excited to leave. But it's like sometimes, okay, let me sit here for a minute. And I love like the example of like, just like look at a squirrel and see what they're doing, because that could help somebody, even like Joe, to sort of refocus on, think about nothing.
And one of the things that Jamie and I are both kind of burdened with, and we've talked about this recently, is that we're kind of, we're kind of the glue that holds I wouldn't say holds our families together, but like we're very like in the middle of all of the conversations. Not because we necessarily want to be, but it's that people are venting, telling us what the issue is, or being honest with you. And there are times that I've talked about this, where I've talked with Jamie. We have lunch together every day. And it honestly is a very important part of my day. I enjoy it because we not only get to laugh and talk to each other, but we also get to there are times when I share things with her, but I always, and I've said this to her, like, I feel guilty sharing something with you, knowing how much you already have on your plate. Like, I'm not trying to go, here, fix all this for me. That's not what I'm doing. But like, I just need to get it off my chest to somebody else that's a sympathetic ear that's going to listen to me, and not necessarily judge, or maybe sometimes tell me things that like I need to hear that I don't want to hear. Right. The idea of like, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you put on somebody else's. Like they tell you that on the plane. Like for some reason, I always like, you got to take care of yourself first before you can really take care of others. And I've experienced that a lot. But also, I've watched my children, like my daughter especially, like has a lot of my tendencies, and not just the fact that she's caring and empathetic and unfortunately has been burdened with my ridiculous sense of humor. But she, she's a great kid. She's got a lot of different friend groups, and like everyone's always like confiding in her. And sometimes she's just like, I don't want to know this. And I need to like move myself away. And it's really hard. Like I'll give her advice and I'm like, I should listen to that. So that's the thing too, that I see even in young people, that it starts and it manifests kind of early. And it becomes, difficult to deal with if you don't have the tools in your toolbox to do so. That's one of the things that I think is really great about, your approach. And what does it look like when someone, signs up to work with you? And we really haven't talked about like what it is actually you do as a health coach for teachers. So can you kind of like give us a little window into what that looks like?
Yeah. I'm going to use that really annoying answer again of it depends, but genuinely,
it depends.
It really does. It really does. So typically there are a few reasons why people would come to work with me. So obviously what I do isn't just the physical side. It's not just nutrition and moving more and things, because for me, those are very much the tip of the iceberg. What really gets me going, what really excites me is that beneath the surface. So that's what a lot of what we work on. So we work a lot on mindset, on limiting beliefs, on mental health, on self-worth, on self-respect, on boundaries, on prioritizing yourself. But the kind of way that I like to summarize it when I talk about it is that I essentially help teachers build bite-sized behaviors for their health, whether it's nutrition, movement, sleep, that kind of stuff. But I'll also along the way help them build the beliefs that they need and the boundaries as well to support that. So they're my 3 Bs, the behaviors, the beliefs, and the boundaries. And depending on what someone might want, like I say, usually people want to increase their energy. They usually want to build boundaries and build a better life-work balance. They might have sort of a physical health goal. That might be a bit of weight loss. It might be increasing their fitness or strength and things like that in the gym potentially. But a lot of it is leaning more towards the mental health side of things. So at the moment, I'm helping a lot of people with their stress and managing their stress, leading into things like burnout, like we've already spoken about. So yeah, those are kind of like the main areas that we focus on, really.
I did an exercise today with my students because I really, we call it like SEL, social emotional learning. And we, started to have to carve out time, which of course was another area for a lot of teachers where they were like not really happy. Like, how come I have to do, and it is true, it's like another thing and another thing and another thing. But for those of us who kind of bought into and understand the idea of how important it is to kind of deal and help the kids to deal with their emotions, it is like, so important. So we did a quick exercise today of listing 50 things that bring you joy. And we talked about thanks and giving thanks and what it means to live like from a space of gratitude and understand like how many blessings you have. And I like genuinely will now go forward with the kids that I saw like deeply struggling to finish their lists. Like I know who they are.
This was fascinating to me too when we were talking about it earlier today. Absolutely.
I mean, and I gave them I read them my 50 examples. I gave them like really just a brainstorm opportunity. I wrote things that, a lot of them were like hoodies, like they wrote hoodie sweatshirts. That was like on the top of the list. And so there was a lot of like overlap of a lot of things. And some of them like really, they got to maybe 4 in a category and could not continue. There were 5 categories, 10 items in a category, and it could be anything that they wanted to include. And I really like genuinely watched many of them struggle to come up with things. And I made them write it twice. And the first one I said, because, we get dark here at like 4:30, it starts to get really dark. It's the winter, and it's terrible. And so I said, this is for you to keep for the next couple of months to be able to take out and look and remember, like I was able to list. And then I thought, geez, what about the kids that didn't have very many things that they, can bring them joy. But, it is one of those items where, can really for all of us, like, can you come up with things that, bring you joy? And even if for now, you're not able to maybe, do some of those things. I think one of the words you mentioned for me, patience, what was the term? Patience something. It was in the categories that you listed with like decision. It was like decision, patience. I just don't know the other word that you used.
Was it like patience fatigue?
I guess it was fatigue. It was decision.
Yeah, it was.
Fatigue,
I remember him
right?
saying that. Yeah.
And, and that for me, I have always struggled with being patient. And it's something that I have worked on in the last so many years as a teacher, because I was not getting from the kids what I wanted. And I really had to look at myself and say, like, how am I talking? How am I responding? And so that was a tough thing. But the idea of like having enough patience after you've given all that you can give all day long, in a typical day, Joe and I see, about 100 students every day, over the course of, 4 or 5 classes a day. So it really is not just the decisions, but for me, more of the challenge of the patience. And that is something that, I've struggled with over the years with, the well running dry, so to speak, coming home and being a mom to 3 children and, and having a husband, and how am I supposed to have? And there are times where I've gotten to the point where now I just say, like, you know what? I can't really talk about this with you right now. Like, can you give me an hour? Can you come back after dinner? Can we look at and think about this later? And I found that my family really, my kids are older, but they really do respond to, and I think you were saying boundaries. And I think it's one of those things where you might say, I can't do it, or no, they're not, what are they going to say? Or they're going to be mad, and sometimes it's just easier to say like, hey, can we do this in a little bit?
I think
And,
one of the things also, and I remember Jane, when we started the school year, with like your kids would come home and they'd kind of like, I wouldn't
they
necessarily say,
just dumped on me.
yeah, but
It was a dumping.
you actually
I said no more.
you well, so how did you again, to reiterate, how did you approach that? Because I think it's a really good strategy in this particular episode for us to kind of like
And I
go
think
over again. I think it's a good idea, because we experience this as parents all the time.
And I think it happens with teachers, and I think it happens with teacher parents, and then of course if you have like 12, 13-year-olds, it happens because there's just so many hormones, and it's talk about dysregulated emotions. That's all they are, is dysregulated emotion. But I think what happens is, if you're the parent who receives the children like immediately after school, there can be a discussion of like what happened, and there's a lot of like and then like an airing of grievances, we were calling it. And so what my rule for this year, and I have to say it's been 2 months, and it's just so great. And I'm so happy. Because in the beginning, I'm like, oh no, am I messing my kids up? But I said, we are not going to complain about anything that happened, including myself, until 6 p.m. We're going to come home from school. Typically we're home, 3:30, between 3:30 and 4:30. I said, and we're going to sit with our day, do homework. We're going to, you can go for a walk. You can walk the dog. You can play with her. You can, have something to eat, settle in. You can make a list of things, that I do that a lot with gratitude, all the things. And then if it's still bothering you by 6 o'clock, we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. It gave me time to evaluate my day and then also receive what they were telling me. And a lot of times by 6 o'clock, my husband is also home, which meant that there was another person to receive the information and not just me. And then also a lot of times by then, like no one could even remember the things that had made them like, these egregious acts that happened during the day. It took like a completely different, just everything sort of settled. And then there have been days where it's, they're like, I know it's not 6 o'clock, and it's like, yeah. So now we're like almost able to recognize the things that are so necessary and important, rather than just, let's just dump all
I think the best thing about that was the fact that you gave them other choices. You said you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And then I picture at 6 o'clock, it's like
you're waiting for me.
It's like the Seinfeld episode where it's like Festivus. I don't know if you've watched Seinfeld, Charlie, the sitcom.
The airing of grievances.
It's like the airing of grievances. It's like the day called Festivus. It was like, what is it? The day after Christmas or something. And they have like this day where everyone airs. It's a made up holiday where everyone airs their grievances of one another.
Yeah.
And I just picture your kids like, I now have things to say.
And much like teachers, and I think there's a lot of us that are like this, especially the kids that are in school, which is why I'm always concerned about the kids in school that are like the quieter kids, because a lot of times like they are paying the most attention, they are absorbing the most that is going on around them, and they are the least likely to say what it is, and then so I all the things. But the idea of like, you had said a couple of times, like, it depends. And I just want to say 100%, I don't think there's a better like group of people to understand that it depends than teachers, because everything we do depends. It just, there's never the same. You could do the same lesson 3 times. It could be different based on who's in your class. So it depends. Makes perfect sense to me. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that creating space. Just that whole buffer zone type thing for you all when you come in is amazing. I guess that's kind of we talk about the car and taking that moment.
Yeah.
It's sort of a version of that, isn't it? It's giving yourself time to settle down and just to kind of simmer and kind of think through things and process. And Yeah, that's such a good idea. I'm gonna write that one down for when we have a family.
Oh, you're consulting now. Jamie is now a teacher health coach consultant.
That's funny.
Lovely.
No, and that's the thing is that we all have to, like, if you're an observer, like the three of us obviously are, and here we are learning and listening and talking, you have to take the best of what other people have to offer and then just do your best with it, instead of like, it has to be perfect. You just have to try it and see. And it is not always one size fits all. I'm going to keep replaying the low hanging fruit. It's such great advice, because a lot of times, like, the idea of like, I can't do it all means like, I can't even possibly try. But like, that idea of just start small, start simple. And of course, give yourself grace is also the best.
Yeah. And I also think it's important for us to, lean on our partners, lean on our coworkers. Hopefully I've been doing a better job of asking for help when I need it. Especially when I'm busy and I feel overwhelmed, which happens, from time to time. That's definitely something that we can do. I think teachers are very resourceful and also very helpful. So don't forget to rely on your colleagues. Is there any other final advice, Charley, that you would give to teachers who maybe are feeling a little bit of burnout? Like, what are some other things that maybe you would, and I know it depends, but if there's anything else, kind of wrap up comments that you might give teachers that are struggling with burnout, we'd love to hear them.
I think a big one would be, again, down the sort of the mindset path, would be that this is really uncomfortable for some people to hear, I think, and it was uncomfortable for me to hear. And at points in my career, I probably wouldn't have received it very well. But at the end of the day, this is just my perspective, but I think it's up to us for us to decide what good enough looks like for us. And that's really, really difficult when you've got, you guys call them admin, right? Administration?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. We call them like SLT or senior leadership team or whatever, but you've got people breathing down your neck, and you've got deadlines, and you've got assessments and data and this, that, and the other, and all of the things that we know happen in teaching. And that's without the actual teaching the students and the behavior and taking on everything we spoke about today. If we allow our definition of good enough to be decided by other people, we will never feel it. And I think if we allow that to be so, if we allow other people to set our boundaries and to tell us when we've done enough, we'll be burnt out. There's no way around it. And it's really uncomfortable because it puts the onus on us. But I'm a big fan of controlling the controllables and coming back to what is within your circle of control. And when you can do that, you can affect something, you can impact something in your immediate circle, something that impacts you today. And then that creates ripple effects. You were talking about your daughter earlier and things. And like when we have a positive view of ourselves, when we say, right, got this on my to-do list, but you know what? Enough is enough today. I've given it my best shot. I had 75%. I gave 65% of that to school. I'm going to have this 10% for myself. I've done enough. That's okay. And we give ourselves that time, or like you, Jamie, with that buffer zone with your family, like that example and that modeling, because children pick up on what we do, right? Not what we say. That setting such a great example for everyone around us. And we create these ripple effects that then impact the people closest to us, and then their friends and their communities and the schools in your district. And I really do believe that when we can decide what our own good enough looks like, we can take back that power with our well-being. So that would probably be one that I'd love to leave people with.
Yeah, wow. That is a perfect spot for us to wrap up our episode. And Charley, I cannot thank you enough for being with us today, for our first guest from across the pond. Hopefully not our last.
Thank you, Charley.
Thank you.
This is our thing. Charley, I appreciate you.
We appreciate
and not only
you, Charley.
I appreciate you, Jamie. But Charley, I also, one thing I actually would like to say is, I know I'm using the word again, I really appreciate the fact that you were not only here, but that you were honest and you shared your story with us, because I think that that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And I think that our profession needs people like you to be advocates for, our mental health and well-being. So I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you both. Appreciate you both too.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. We'll see you on the next episode of the Balancing Act podcast. Okay.
Look for the Balancing Act podcast every week on your favorite podcast platform. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Thank you for being a part of our audience. We appreciate you.